Good morning, everybody. Everything new under the sun. Talking today about an EMP proof car. Of course, the big thing in the news is the hypersonic missile that Russia has launched, and it could possibly carry a nuclear warhead. And the question comes up about EMPs, electromagnetic pulses. Can you do to protect your electronics from them, your radio systems, your communications, your computers, your smartphones, etc.? Can you protect them? And even if you protect them, do they have what they need externally to operate? Such as, if you protect your cell phone in a Faraday cage, will there be any cell phone towers operational? Because those would be affected as well. Anything with electronics. So the big question is, what happens if an electromagnetic pulse happens, a nuclear detonation happens up in the sky, which would be the most damaging in terms of electromagnetic pulse effects. And what happens is that the electromagnetic pulse, it overwhelms electrical systems. So your computer chips, anything with wires, electricity will literally be induced in those, run down the wires and overwhelm any sort of electronics. Resistors, it will pop resistors. It will just send so much power through them to basically fry electronics. And that's really the concern. And so, is there a zombie apocalypse coming where cars are dead on the streets and you're left walking? Well, I'm going to talk today about EMP proof cars. And you may know by prior videos on this channel that I happen to have a Volkswagen Beetle. And it is one interesting case for sort of a zombie apocalypse, sort of end of the world vehicle. There's not much to it in terms of electronics. Indeed, there are no actual electronics. There's just an electrical system, which still could be overwhelmed, but much less likely to be hit by anything significant, because you are talking about maybe some resistors and diodes, maybe some relays for lights and that sort of thing, but very limited. You look under the hood of a Volkswagen Beetle, especially an older one, and you'll literally just find wires going here and there from the battery, and not much there. So in terms of comparing it to a modern car with a full computer system that lights up the dash and that has GPS on board and that has engine management systems, it is well far away from that sort of risk of an EMP or a Carrington type event, which we're going to talk about. Here's an image of a movie, a Hollywood type movie where you have cars that are completely stalled on the road, can't move anywhere, and maybe they're abandoned, and you have a lone guy going on a horse because they've been all taken out, right? And so this is the idea that we think of. Well, it's not quite as you think or you've been told necessarily. I highlighted a few things we're going to take a look at. It says, in modern times, our tools have become electronic. Cell phones, computers, and records, all electronic. Gone are the days of storing important records, photos, and media on analog storage like paper or videotape. Now, videotape actually stores information magnetically is the word I'm trying to think of, magnetically. And so you get a significant pulse. You know that if you put a big magnet by a cassette tape, it's going to erase it. So there's a potential for trouble there as well in terms of erasing data. But we are in the digital age, and we are even more reliant on electronic data and systems, etc. It says the force can really nix electronics is the force that can nix electronics is electromagnetic pulses. So this idea of the EMP blast, which can come from a nuclear detonation, and know that the easiest way for Russia to take out any world power, United States, Canada, China, whomever it might like to, the easiest way is to take out your electronics. It doesn't have to use conventional weapons and take out New York or Los Angeles or something like this and destroy things, physically destroy things. No, all they have to do is take your internet out. And then you can't buy gas, you can't buy food. The country is in absolute disarray and chaos and panic. No one can participate in the economy in any sort of way. if major electronic systems are down, if the internet is down, if cell phones are down, basically all our communications are down. No one knows how to run an amateur radio anymore. Nobody has point-to-point communications really anymore, except some emergency services. So by that standard, civilization as we know it would be 100% hampered and down. And all you need to do, again, you don't have to kill a person. The death of people will come later when people get desperate and Mad Max scenario ensues and people are shooting each other and violence and starving and famine because supply chains are broken. Trucks may not be working, or trucks don't have GPS systems. They don't have directions to their destination. So that's what would occur out of this. The initial blast would just take out electronics. And then after that, as we're thrown into the 1800s, that's when the downstream effects occur. It goes on, these are bursts, so EMPs, these are bursts of electromagnetic energy that can be naturally occurring, such as lightning storms, solar flares, or they can be man-made. If a hostile power wanted to knock out the electrical grid in an entire continent, they might employ a high-altitude nuclear explosion. That's because if they exploded at ground level, it doesn't go very far. But if they raise it up 300, 400, 500 miles, the range of that electromagnetic pulse spreads out to where you can get a wide area of effect from that electromagnetic pulse. In one such high-altitude test named Starfish Prime, electronics more than 500 miles away in Honolulu and New Zealand were damaged, so electronics in general, while 300 streetlights in Oahu, Hawaii, were fused. So that literally means they melted down because the energy that was induced into the wires in that system basically turned it into a big welding machine, a big welder, and fused, literally melted the wires and the lights in Oahu, Hawaii. And it says, because we no longer travel by horse and buggy, it's worth asking the question, will an EMP knock out a car? So this is the big question, and they show a picture of a Tesla there, which we'll talk about. So when has this happened in the past? Well, the Carrington Event, you may have heard of that. That was the largest ever recorded geomagnetic storm. From the 1st to the 2nd of September 1859, and they didn't have many electronics then, and if this happened now, I think it would be lights out in large part for maybe a lot of the world. A coronal mass ejection sent plasma hurtling towards Earth. The resultant magnetic activity caused sparks to fly off telegraph poles because so much energy was induced into them. Sparks were flying off them. While some telegraph operators experienced burns and electric shocks, some devices that were unplugged were still operable for hours because of the energy, I think, infused into them. And an aurora illuminated the night sky as far south as the Caribbean. In 1989, a solar flare knocked out a vast chunk of Canadian electrical grid, while a Carrington-level event occurred in 2012 but missed the Earth by a matter of days. So I think it's by God's grace that we haven't been hit by another Carrington event. I think we will be thrust in the darkness, literally and metaphorically, as well as maybe our communications will go down if another Carrington event happened. And again, in this day and age, World War III does not have to mean the use of conventional weapons destroying buildings. It simply can mean taking out communications, taking down grids. You take the electricity and the communications from a society, and they collapse very, very fast. And when communications are gone, people panic, and that's when you then you need the army of the nation, not to fight a foreign power, but to keep peace and to keep looting down in your own country. So really, again, it's very easy for Russia to take out another country in World War III, and the militaries of the world know this. It's no longer about destroying physical objects. It's about taking out what we depend on, our internet, our communications, our GPS guidance. These are the sorts of things that they have to attack, and they know that. Since Henry Ford rolled the Model T off the production line October 1st, 1908, the internal combustion engine has not really changed. The automobile is still mainly a mechanical beast of pistons, cogs, and machinery This kind of brute force engineering is immune to the effects of an EMP. So again, when we talk about the Volkswagen Beetle as one example, very, very simple. Just an engine. You could disconnect the lights from it. You don't need the lights in an end of the world scenario, and you still have a functioning engine for the most part. It's very unlikely that it would be affected, and there's just not much to it. And so when you talk about nuts and bolts, there's not much for an electromagnetic pulse to take out. Again, but as you get to newer cars, and we had this in we had a Dodge Caliber, and it had computer trouble, and the computer would turn on and off while you were driving, and it was a glitch. There was a recall on our Dodge Caliber. I forget what year it was, maybe a 2001 Dodge Caliber, and literally as you were driving, all systems would shut down. The dash would go blank. The car would stop accelerating. You had no controls because it was fly-by-wire. The gas pedal was electronic. I don't know if the brake was electronic or not, but certainly the gas was. It's just fly-by-wire means you're pressing the pedal, but there's no physical connection between the pedal and the carburetor or the fuel injection system. There's no wire that's rotating something in the engine to increase gas. It's literally going up to the computer. The computer is sending signals to the fuel delivery system in the engine. And so if the computer doesn't work, then you can't control that engine. You can't add gas to that engine to make it run. Literally, it would shut off on the highway, and the car would start coasting. Thankfully, it was not steer-by-wire, because you wouldn't be able to steer the car anymore, and that would be very, very dangerous, obviously. And we had to get a couple computers put into that system. So it's very common for computer systems just to die in modern cars, let alone having any external input that would overwhelm them. It says zero electronics is the ultimate protection from an EMP, and that goes for anything. That's why shovels, rakes, hose, things that don't require any electricity, just require blood, sweat, and tears to till a garden. That's why they are valuable things to have. So let's go down and talk about the results. An EMP may affect electronics to varying degrees, according to a study by the United States EMP Commission. But they will not hobble all vehicles. The study tested 50 cars that were manufactured between 1987 and 2002. These cars were exposed to an array of EMP blasts up to 50 kilovolts per meter. I'm not sure if that's meter. The EMP effects on cars were varied. Only 3 of the cars shut down while they were driving. So there's the results of it. Only 3 of the cars were shut down while driving. Just 1 vehicle would not restart, while the other 2 restarted afterwards without any hitches. The interference by EMP blasts on cars was exclusively in the electronic systems, and such interference was mainly a nuisance value that would not in themselves pose a fatal threat to the passenger or driver. These included disruptions to turning signals, the radio signal, the headlights, the brake lights, so you wouldn't be able to listen to your radio, as an example. And it goes and asks the question, are Teslas EMP proof? So Teslas are, pretty much all electronic fly-by-wire battery systems. If you send an electromagnetic pulse into them, who knows what would happen? And that's really the response here. They don't exactly know. You'd have to ask Tesla. I don't know if Tesla has done any tests here. There is one saving grace, though. They're not grounded. It says, however, because the car is not grounded, it may be the case that no damage is done to the car. In the same way that birds sit on a power line, do not get electrically shocked, there is no difference in potential. It's because the energy can't flow through the system to a ground point. Remember, when you're talking about lightning during a thunderstorm, it's trying to find the path of least resistance to the ground. A positive charge wants to go to the negatively charged ground. So, and that's why it picks tall towers, for example. They're the path of least resistance to the ground. That's why they're jagged when electricity flows from the clouds to the ground. It's not a straight line. It's a jagged line, and it's finding the path of least resistance through the charged atmosphere to get to the ground effectively. So because cars aren't grounded directly, they ride on rubber. That means they have less chance of having any resulting impact from electromagnetic pulse. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't still be overwhelmed. You get enough power, certainly they can be, but they may be less effective. In the same way, a Tesla sits on rubber tires, so there would be no difference of potential that would affect electronic components of the car if there is adequate shielding of electronics. But if an enemy force wanted to take out these vehicles, if they took out the internet, note that Teslas rely on connectivity to the Tesla Corporation for things like vehicle updates. If there is no internet, do they still work? And I've heard of stories where there was no internet, so they couldn't open their doors unless they had their physical key on them. If they're opening their Tesla doors with their proximity sensors to their cell phone or what have you, because the internet wasn't working, the cell phone, the car couldn't verify the signal from the cell phone via the Tesla server system, and so they couldn't get in unless they had their physical key. So again, you go back to physical things that are left standing when this happens. If the internet goes out, communications, your car, which if you're relying on Bluetooth or authentication systems to get into it, you may not be able to do that. So kind of secondary issues with Tesla's other cars of this time, which are computer connected. So the older car you have, the better chance you have that it's going to work. You're going to be able to get into it and use it when this happens. The other thing is when if a nuclear EMP device were to be exploded above the United States, or the Russia took out the United States internet, it's likely that it's going to be taken out in certain specific centers, large city centers where the big servers are, the routers, kind of the main points of contact that drive the internet. It's likely those are going to be taken out by an EMP blast. Whereas if you're living in the sticks, 1,000 miles away, you're not going to be affected directly, i.e. your car may still work, but maybe your internet is spotty or goes down because those centers, those routers, those points of contact that the internet requires to connect all the big cities and the smaller towns, that may be taken out. So your local internet may work, but you may not be able to search any websites because the main distribution centers of the internet are taken out of commission. So that's kind of the bigger issue. You may not feel the effects of an EMP, but your wider communication may be taken out. So I think it's important to understand that vehicles probably would not get affected. There will be some that get affected. Some will still work, and but the bigger question is your communications. Are these new cars relying on internet connected direction finding GPS and the supply chain? They definitely rely on GPS and direction and communication via computers. And the new trucks have lots of electronics on them. Again, which if they're not connected to the internet, how many of them will still working? Even if you take 10% of them out, is that going to be enough to really grind the supply chain to a halt because you just have such a backup and holes in the supply chain system where these systems are not working? So we'd probably start relying on diesel freight trains and such, which would probably still work, but you wouldn't have your tracking systems. You wouldn't have communications to maybe the signal system on the railway would be interrupted, and so you have these troubles, these kind of secondary issues. While your specific vehicle may not be affected, you're going to have these secondary communications as issues. But it's never a bad idea to have older technology, older motorcycles, older cars, older systems in general. Don't rely on your computers, your electronics. If you have electronics that you make use of, like Nest or these other electronic systems to open doors on your house, surveillance systems, ways to get into your house, ways to monitor your house. Those are all computer systems which generally rely on cloud computing. and go up to the cloud, if you will, for authentication. A lot of those aren't, may not work. If your internet is out, if the internet is simply down and not working, how are you going to access, open your house? So hopefully you have a physical key. So again, when you need physical backups to all your things, don't rely on electronics. That's kind of the worst way to go. And not only that, but hackers can get into any of those systems and unlock your doors or see what your surveillance systems are seeing. If you get a Chinese surveillance system, it's open to the internet. The Chinese or any other government or agency may have access to use that and to monitor through your own internet. Because they can hack into these web-connected devices. All right. I think I've spoken enough on that. We'll leave it there. You guys let me know what you think in the comments. So what are you doing to protect yourself against EMPs, internet down, communications down? Or do you think this will never come to North America? I think it would be incredible if this happened. It would be Mad Max. Again, Russia wouldn't have to take us out with conventional devices. Just take out our communications, and people will get desperate and violent very, very quickly. I was reading an article this morning about gas thefts in the United States, just because of a simple short spike, over the last 2 weeks of gas prices, and people are already panicking, stealing gas from gas stations. We're not even anywhere near Mad Max, and people are getting violent, and thefts and mobs are going around right now. Wait till the communications goes down. Wait till internet goes down. Wait till people really start getting desperate for food. How many roving gangs with all sorts of weapons are going to be going around looking for food? It gets a lot worse, folks. Any sign of any catastrophe, and even for a 24-hour period, grid down 24-hour period, people will get desperate and violent, and we will see a Mad Max sort of scenario rolling out. So you need to get your heart and your mind ready for these things. I think they're coming. We'll see. Let me know in the comments what you think. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next video.